we begin this morning with Jane Seymour, who has wowed us for decades, including when she starred with Christopher Reeve in the romantic classic Somewhere in Time. Then she became a beloved TV fixture as Dr. Quinn Medicine Women. Some of you may know her best as a Bond girl. Now she is sharing some inspirational stories in her new book, The Road Ahead. And she is here with some personal insights about sexual harassment and the Me Too movement as well. Please welcome the one and only Jane Seymour. Great to see you. Please come.
There's enough pictures of me around here.
None compares to the actual thing. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So The Road Ahead is the name of the book. And in talking about this and sort of the life lessons learned along the way, we find ourselves in this country immersed in this sexual harassment revolution, you know? And you've come out and said publicly that you had your own Me Too moment. Can we start there?
Well, I will. I'm not going to mention the person's name for only one reason, which is that he's passed. And so I just feel that, out of respect, I shouldn't. But I definitely feel the story is important. I came to Hollywood, I think it's about 22 or 23 years old. I came to do a test for my first Hollywood movie, and was a wonderful producer. We had a great experience. I did the test, and then another producer called my agent and said, I want to test Jane as well for another movie. So it was like, wow, amazing. So the second producer, who's the one I'm going to talk about, had gotten a copy of the first test and wanted to screen it for me so I could see it. And he told my agent, and I was told to go to his house because he was having a big screening of a movie with lots of people, and before the people came, he was going to show me this little test. So I go to his house, and you have to understand, this guy was the single most powerful man in Hollywood at that time. I mean, the most. And so I went to his house, and he showed me the thing, and there was nobody else there except for the screening guy, who I never saw. And the next thing I know, he says, you know, you're amazing, you're fantastic, I'm so excited, you know, I've told everyone that you're the perfect person for our movie, and, you know, and the director and everybody, and now it's your turn. And I said, my turn? He said, yeah, now you know what you've got to do. And I said, yes, I could do a really great screen test day after tomorrow. And he went, no, you know what you have to do. And he put his hand on my thigh, right up close, right up, you know, at the wrong place. And I'm on a very long American sofa. We don't have them that long in England. But I'm doing the English thing. I'm like crossing my legs and trying to avoid, and I keep going, and he keeps going, and I'd get to the end of the sofa, and there's just no two ways about it. I got off the sofa, and I said, I'm really sorry, but I have to leave right now. I didn't have a car. I came in a cab. I said, can you call me a cab? He basically got furious. He called the cab, and he turned to me and he looked me in the eye and he said, if you ever tell anyone that you were ever here, let alone what happened, you will never work again anywhere in the world. And I was like shaking, and I said, but you know, my agent, everyone knows I was here. You have to lie. You have to tell them you weren't there. You didn't come. I'm now shaking. I get in the cab. The cab comes, and he thrusts a $10 bill in my hand. And I'm like, oh, it was like disgusting. I got back. The next day, my agent called and said, how did it go? How did it go? Mm-hmm. I said, I didn't go. And he went, oh, I'm really glad. I said, why? He said, well, you know, if you had gone, I don't know. He said, it could have been a little difficult for you. I mean,
it was an open secret.
It was an open secret. Everyone knew. And then the producer called me 10, 15 minutes later and said, how did it go last night? And I said, well, you know, at the last one I didn't go. And he went, oh. He said, you know, I was talking to my wife, and I was just thinking, you know, maybe I should tell her that maybe she shouldn't go. So basically, people who were protecting me knew what I was going to have to do.
And led you in there like a lamb to the slaughter.
Lamb to the slaughter. And I guess the understanding is that if you are that, you know, desperate for the job, and you're a young actress, maybe you make a choice. I made the opposite choice. The part was then immediately offered to somebody else. Of course, the test was a waste of time, really. And I was on the airplane, and another producer was on the airplane, and I said, oh, what are you doing here? I said, I'm offering the role to somebody else. And he said, by the way, we all know what you did, and you made the right choice.
Wow.
Anyway, there's a good end to this story. I decided well, the bad end was that I went back to England. I quit acting for a year. I wouldn't act. I gave up. I wasn't going back to America. I wasn't going to go to Hollywood. You know, if that's what you had to do to work, and I'd been working as an actress before and starred in things, I was just not prepared to do it. So I ate myself silly. I became a good housewife, did a lot of needlepoint.
That part sounds fun.
And then eventually I got back on my feet, and I got back in the theater, and then eventually I went back to Hollywood. I was invited to this man's house again.
Did he forget what had happened?
I was not going to go, but I'd been asked because I was British and Princess Margaret was going to be there, and they wanted me to be there. So I showed up, and sadly, being English, I was a little bit early. And there he was, and he looked at me, and he said, "Don't I know you?" And I'm shaking, and I went, "Not if you don't remember me," and walked away. Wow. And then he persisted. 3 times he kept following me and said, "You know, do I know you? Do I know you?" And I said, anyway, at the end of the thing, he said, "You know, I've got a movie for you," and gives me the whole spiel.
Unbelievable. But good, because he wasn't actively trying to ruin you, I suppose.
No, he didn't. So my agent said, "We want you to meet with so-and-so." It's a different agent. And I said, "You know what? I've had a little history here, so I think it's best if it's in a restaurant,
yeah.
One of you are there." Anyway, long story short, I ended up making that movie, and it's one of the movies that I'm most proud of.
Is it Somewhere in Time?
Somewhere in Time. Who can believe that awful person?
Wow. You know, I mean, it's a story about perseverance and not giving up on yourself. Right. And I think a lot of women and young men can relate to that now. And I know that you've said this happened to your son.
My son,
who's a filmmaker.
My son's a filmmaker. He's 32 years old. His name's Sean M. Flynn. When he was 20 years old, he was at film school. He made a film called Numb. He was at, in a Hollywood event, talking about his film, being a young filmmaker, and a publicist came up to him and said, "Come with me, I can take you to some people that will be much better for your career, come with me." So he grabbed his friend, thank God, and they went in the car with this guy, and they were in the car, and all of a sudden my son's going all loopy and he doesn't know what's happened. The guy had roofied him, whatever roofies are. And then started grabbing his private parts and trying to make out with him. And his friend, mercifully, was, completely sober and saw what was going on. When the car stopped, he grabbed my son and they ran. And, people don't think about that either. It happened to him.
Right. But we've seen that with the Kevin Spacey case, that young men get it too.
He felt shame. He couldn't talk about it, And then he made this wonderful music video it's called Joan of Arc, for a wonderful band called the Braves, and he chose to show women being objectified, women being used by men, and how the women then turn on the men.
It was somewhat autobiographical, based on his own experience.
Autobiographical, and
Jane, it's good for you and good for him for allowing you to share that story, because it is we've heard this time and time again, that the victims blame themselves and think somehow they brought it upon themselves, and that is just exactly the wrong thing. The blame is on the perpetrators. I want to ask you, because in the book you have a lot of advice on how to handle life's challenges. And I loved this little bit, this 3-point plan for whatever challenge comes your way, whatever adversity may be in your life right now. Number 1, accept it. Number 2, forgive. And number 3, engage in a selfless act of kindness. Can you describe how that's helped you over the course of your life?
The inspiration came from my mom, who survived World War II in a Japanese camp, internment camp, for 3.5 years. So she had to accept what had happened, and she had to learn to forgive, and she went back to Japan, and she let go of all of it. And when she was in the camp, she said the only reason she survived was she was always helping other people, because there's always someone worse off than you. So what I wanted to talk about in the book was I wanted real stories. I got the most amazing people to tell stories that they normally would never tell anyone. And, if it was too close to home, they would maybe change their name a little bit, but most people didn't. My intention was for people to understand that the worst thing in the world to me is to lose a child. And obviously to lose someone you love, or, to be bullied, or to lose your job. I mean, there's a million different things, illnesses. We cover every part of the gamut. But every one of these people, having accepted it, and it was tough, they then found a way to have a purpose by helping other people from the perspective of what it was that they'd been through. So, for example, this young man, Jesse Billauer, who was a young surfer, I think he was 17 at the time. He was out surfing. He used to surf huge waves, but he was just hanging out. And he hit a sandbar and trashed out. His friends thought, you know, he was goofing around, but he couldn't move, and he became a quadriplegic. He didn't think that life was worth living at that age until his friends managed to find a way to change a surfboard so that they could tie him to it and he could surf again.
Wow.
So guess what he does? He has his organization called Life Rolls On, and he takes people who are newly quadriplegic and paraplegic, and he takes them out surfing with his friends. Yeah, there's a lot of great stories.
It has a lot of great life advice in there, and I know Jane lives this herself. We met years ago for the first time at Child Help, this charity that we both love that helps abused children, and you've spent a lifetime giving back. It's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I hope that the book helps lots and lots of people.
It will. It's called The Road Ahead. Don't forget to check it out, and all the best to you.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.